Mark, this discussion is going to be on critical thinking. My name's Charles W. Bill Marshall. That's my email address. I'm basing this off of research from several places, but one of them I'm listing there. If you want to reach me, contact me at the email address and we'll set up an MS Team meeting. Okay, what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the ability to think in an organized and rational manner in order to understand the connections between the ideas and their facts. It helps you decide what to believe in. In other words, it's thinking about thinking, identifying, analyzing, and trying to fixing flaws in the way you think. It seems straightforward, but it's something that you need to do and think about every day. It takes practice and patience. There are 7 things that will help you, steps that will help you, and you can work on them in your everyday life and every day be better at it. The first one is to identify the problem or question, and we're going to come back and talk about each of these. Then you need to gather data, opinions, and arguments. Then you got to analyze and evaluate that data, identify the assumptions that are buried into that data, establish the significance of the data that you've got, make a decision or reach a conclusion. A lot of people do the first 5, never get around to 6, and if you don't do 6, not much point. And after you've made a decision or reached a conclusion, you need to present it or communicate it. So identify the problem or question. In college, it's going to be easier for you because the class is going to say, this is the question I want you to solve. But it's important to be as precise as possible. To narrow the issue, it's easier to find a solution or answer. But the other thing you've got to be careful of is that you think broadly enough also. Western Union thought they were in the telegraph business. And when Alexander Graham Bell showed up with a telephone, they weren't interested because they did telegraph. They didn't want to do anything with that wasn't Morse code. And they lost, the world went to telephone. They thought about the idea and they probably had it narrowed the issue. But in that case, they narrowed it too much. So it's a balancing act, as with most things. Next, you need to gather data, opinions, and arguments. Try to find several sources to present different ideas and points of view. If you always go to a liberal news source, or if you always go to a conservative news source, or if you only go to General Motors dealerships, or you only go to Tesla dealerships, you're going to have one point of view. It's important to look at it from many directions, and different people will bring different prejudices, and it's important for you to look at all of those. So once you've found the different sources to look at, you need to analyze and evaluate the data. Are the sources reliable? Is this Joe that you just met at the bar last night, and Joe's only been in the business for a week? Or is this somebody that's been doing this for 30 or 40 years and has a proven track record? Are their conclusions data-backed or just argumentative? You'll find people that'll, if somebody tells you that they can tell you where the sun comes up, one thing is, how many times has the sun come up in that position? Look at the data that they have, not just their claims. Is there enough information or data to support a given hypothesis? If somebody has one point and tries to tell you the direction of the line, you can't get there from here because it takes at least 2 points to determine a line. And it often takes more than one example or one data point, much the same way. So if you find a guy who went to the racetrack last Saturday and bet on a winning horse and made it rich, it doesn't follow that if you go to the racetrack next Saturday, you'll come home rich also. You got to make sure that you got enough data to support the hypothesis. Identify the assumptions. Are you sure the sources that you found are unbiased? Again, if you only talk to General Motors, they're going to think that all the right answers are General Motors cars. If you only talk to Microsoft, you're only going to look at Microsoft solutions. And you can pick religions, you can pick anything that you want. You need to look at the source of your information and consider if they have a vested interest or if they're biased. Are you sure you weren't biased in your search for answers? If you have a question and you only talk to conservatives, you're probably not looking at everything. It's important to talk to the other side also, so you can at least understand why you don't agree with them. 5, establish the significance. What piece of information is the most important? And a lot of that is sample sizes and so forth, but you got to look at all information is not created equal. Is a sample size sufficient? And that deals with what piece of information is important. But if you find out that one piece of information you learn is that if you do this procedure wrong, you die, that's pretty important. And so the fact that it's really cheap to do it this way doesn't have near as much importance as the fact that if it doesn't work out, you die. Are all opinions and arguments even relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve? It's very easily to get diverted. So you start out to try to find a good word processing program, and pretty soon you're talking about what brand of computer to run it on. Well, the decision about a word processing doesn't need to get to the detail of what computer to run it on yet. It may be relevant, but you don't want to spend a lot of time on, well, should it be an Acer or should it be an HP? Because that's really not what you're trying to solve. Okay, you need to make a decision and reach a conclusion. There's lots of folks that spend a lot of time on the first 5 and never get to the make the decision. It's called paralysis by analysis. You need to, when you start, decide how much is this solution worth. If you have something that, if you're trying to decide where you're going to park at the football game this weekend, and you decide that there's different research that you could do that'll only take 3 weeks, doesn't make any difference. The football game you're going to is this weekend, so you need to be sure that you take steps that will get you a conclusion in time to be actionable. And you want to weigh the strengths and limitations of all possible options. And, what's the best thing could happen if you pick this? What's the worst thing could happen? And that will help you. Many times people talk about making lists and, what are all the reasons I should do this? What are all the reasons I shouldn't do that? That's another way of saying the same thing. And you can't forget the last one, which is to present and to communicate. Unless you live on a desert island. I mean, I've been in the military. I've worked in private industry. I've worked in churches. I've worked participated in families. And in each case, you need to explain to people why you reached the conclusion and let the stakeholders understand why it makes sense to do it this way. The because I said so is really not a very viable way to bring along your team. Your critical exercise that we're going to do to try to put this into place is that we use a data modeling software to do our entity relationship diagrams. And my question to you, and so this is an example where I'm going to solve your point 1 because I'm going to tell you the question. What data modeling software should this class use to prepare ERD diagrams next semester? You can consider that you want to do open source. You can decide that you want to do cloud-based. You can consider that you want it to be on a Microsoft, or you can decide that you want to be software agnostic and you want something that runs so that people can use it on a Chromebook or in Linux. But I want you to submit a 1-page answer for this exercise or this assignment that answers the question, what modeling software should the class use next semester? And I want you to defend your answer. And I'm going to use that to grasp and to understand how well you are approaching critical thinking. This is just another assignment through the year, but I will tell you data modeling and databases are important, but even more important is critical thinking. So if you have any questions about any of these, you know how to get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to discuss them with you. Thank you.